Hello, my name is Mark Allen, and we're all here to take a look at the most recent risk assessment that's been completed for the Amalgamated Bottle Cap Company. The end goal for this assessment is to protect the Amalgamated Bottle Cap Company. There are four major systems that need to be protected from both internal and external threats to the company. The four major systems that have been reviewed are the Human Resources Information System, Payroll, Operations, and Email Systems. The method that we use, or that was followed for this assessment, is the same that has been utilized for the past 3 years within the company. It's the NISP 800. This document is a guideline for performing the assessment through a series of steps that yields quantifiable conclusions. By using this format, we can consistently compare to the past assessments that have been completed, and we also have a gauge for comparison in the future. We're going to take a brief look at each step, which leads us to the conclusions of how we protect these assets. And the assets are human resources, payroll, operations, and email systems. So the first step we take is characterization. What is each of these systems? And so here's a brief summary of the four assets or systems that we're protecting. When we looked at this included asset scoping, interviews, asset profile surveys. There are four systems identified for the scope of work in the risk assessment. The first one, which is human resources. This system houses all data pertaining to every employee, past and present, of ABC. The data contained is confidential, includes resumes, health insurance information, grievances, and disciplinary actions. We have to protect this data. Payroll obviously handles payroll for the employees of the organization, accounts receivable and payable. This also houses routing and account numbers for vendors, etc. We need to protect these account numbers. Operations. This handles all the mechanized equipments and functions of the production plant. In the email, this system handles all internal and external messaging programs. Now, the next thing we want to do is identify the threats that could actually attack these four systems. So what we did is we've reviewed the security threats, which means we had interviews with key personnel to include the CEO, CFO, COO, HR manager, and IT manager. We looked at data reports from third-party vendors. We also looked at reports and statistics from various independent security groups. This includes groups such as the Information Security Systems Association. We looked at the audit findings. We obtained the previous reviews and assessments and audits. We used third-party, internal, and external penetration testing to see who could get into the systems. We looked at the security logs, and we obtained and discussed the past 2 years of security logs with the Chief Information Officer. We also looked at incident summaries. We obtained them, examined and reviewed the incident reports with the CIO, and we reviewed the network performance metrics. Now, once we had our threats and vulnerabilities confirmed, we began to determine the impact that a threat or vulnerability pair could have and the likelihood that it could occur. These are recorded and given scores. This helps to prioritize and refocus our sources. As you see in this sample of the HRIS system, the highest risk score is at the bottom. In this case, the vulnerability could be insufficient physical controls, and the threat is criminals or pilferers. We know HR information is utilized by all personnel, accessible by hard copy, so what controls are in place to restrict or control the file room? Now, at the top, a vulnerability is lack of encryption of the HR files. The threat is someone intercepting these transmitting and opening files. As with the hard copy files, we are restricting or controlling the data by encrypting the files. That's the question, which leads us to the discussion of controls. Controls are basically the safeguards in place that protect the data in the four systems that we're concerned with. The calculation for the control level is shown in this matrix. The rating system is 1 through 5, with 5 being the strongest measure of protection and a rating of 1 is the lowest. You'll see the second column has a reverse control number. This number balances the risk score with the current protections in place. So therefore, the stronger the protection measures or the controls that are in place, the lower the final risk score will be. This is a teeter-totter balance between those who want to infiltrate the system and those who want to protect the system. Now, the next slide that we'll be looking at is going to show the types of controls that might be in place. With the HRIS system being identified as high risk, the controls in place were also reviewed. It was clarified that transmission encryption was weak. This allows data transferred from human resources to personal computers or desktop computers within the corporation to be opened by anyone who can gain access. Now, there is noted that the passwords are standard, which is typical and rarely changed. However, this once again allows criminals to access the data more readily. There was also a lack of security awareness training for the individuals who are sending and receiving this data, both from the HR department to all the employees within the company. Many employees access and open their human resources file while using public Wi-Fi or personal smartphones and tablets, which is a hotbed for criminal hackers. In essence, the files and human resources are readily accessed by internal and external criminals due to lack of controls. Now, the next thing we will look at is the actual risk register. This slide is a representative sample of the final risk register. The register identifies the problem and provides an analysis and recommendation cure for each of them. This particular risk is related to the deficiency found in the HR system we saw in the previous slide, which is people accessing information due to lack of encryption and lack of password control. However, the single risk encompasses multiple systems. For example, the risk found in the HR system also applies to the email system. Whenever there is communication, there is a risk for that transmission to be intercepted. So for this example, we look at the risk ID 1, which is interception of data. This could apply to the entire organization. As we see, it could both hurt the human resources system and the email system. On the narrative, what we're really looking at is this confidential information should not be transferred to anyone other than whom it is intended, and we need to protect it and make sure that if anybody does surpass the systems that we have in place, they cannot open the files that we're sending. These could be files, again, related to your resume, your health insurance, and other personal information which no one wants to have put out there. The next thing is the actual impact. We know that there is possible capturing and misuse of personal records leading to a breach of privacy, and we can't have that. The rationale: multiple logs show intentional internal users have received or accessed the confidential data. Our cure and treatment: transmission encryption. There are many formulas, there are many calculations and ways to do the transmission encryption. Also, security awareness. This is simple training that could occur in a classroom. Last, we want to look at our conclusion. In conclusion, we have looked at the organization as a whole and the individual systems involved. The current and prospective threats that could harm ABC were balanced with the current controls or preventive measures that are currently in place. And for each of the 4 systems, a risk register has been documented. This leads us to the solutions which we all desire. These solutions, described as treatments, can ensure that the ABC company will continue operations with less downtime and harm that can be caused by both internal and external sources. For a complete review of system scores and risk classifications, please refer to the data collection and computation metrics in the appendices of this report. I have scheduled a follow-up meeting to review the details of the assessment with each department head, and I look forward to seeing you.